got fireworks and everything. I feel like I'm walking back into the Olympics. Oh my goodness, thank you so much for having me. Okay, so I have to admit, when I see that video, and I've seen it a few times at this point, I even know how it ends, but I still get so nervous. I mean, the cold sweat that maybe today's the day I don't land the dismount. So, phew. Okay, so I'm gonna keep that medal. But no, seriously, thank you so much for inviting me to be here as part of this incredible event and celebration of all of your hard work. And I already heard, so we have some Olympic fans out here. Yeah. Maybe even a few gymnastics fans. And maybe a few of you, I know it was a really long time ago, maybe a few of you remember way back to the 1996 Olympic Games. Yeah, over 20 years ago. I'm starting to feel a little dated at this point, but I love the Olympics, and I'm so fortunate I get to remain involved with the sport of gymnastics, the Olympic movement, mostly as an analyst and commentator, which basically means I go to the Olympics every 4 years, and I call it work. But every 4 years, I watch as these athletes, they march out onto the competition floor, and I know what they're feeling and thinking, and I am immediately taken back to some of those incredible moments from my own career. And I think especially from the 96 Games, I mean, there's nothing like competing on home soil at an Olympic Games. It is so incredible, and I can remember walking into the Georgia Dome, 40,000 people screaming at the top of their lungs. I'd never heard anything that loud. You walk through this curtain and it is just this sea of red, white, and blue, flashbulbs going off like the 4th of July, and the crowd chanting USA, and you just feel that love and that support, and you also knew you better not leave without that gold medal. But there we were. By the end of the night, the first ever women's gymnastics team to win Olympic gold for the United States of America. It was a dream come true for all of us. And you know, I know that there are so many things about that time that I've forgotten over the years. How many beam routines did I actually practice leading up to that event? I think the aches and the injuries, those tend to fade with time. I can't possibly tell you how many times I fell along the way. But when I look back, I think of some of these very special moments, moments that I'll never forget. And I think we all do this in our lives, in our work. We think back and we think about the highlights, the good times, the gold medal moments, the Instagram-worthy moments of our lives. But I always feel like it's really important to remind myself of the struggles along the way. The falls, the injuries, the moments where I just wanted to give up. Because it's in those moments, it's in the mistakes and the challenges, the falls and the failures, that we learn how important it is to get back up. We get back up. We take that next forward step. We rely on our team. And I know that some of the lessons I learned through sport are the most important lessons I've ever learned, and they help me every day. And yes, they help me excel in gymnastics, but they help me every day. Running my company, motherhood, and even in my battle with cancer. And it's these lessons that I turn to often, things like goal setting, teamwork, a positive attitude, and my commitment to excellence each and every day. Those are the things that I turn to most often. Now, I'll say goal setting is probably one of my favorite things to talk about. My friends all make fun of me because I set goals for everything. Everything. Brush my teeth in the morning, do a load of laundry, check the box, I did it. And sometimes, you know, when you have small children, that's a really big deal. But I do. But goal setting is so crucial because it paves the way for change and growth and improvement, and it helps us close the distance between where we are today and where we want to be tomorrow. My coach, Steve Nuno, he was the one yelling and jumping up and down on the sidelines. He did that a lot. But he was so good at teaching me about goal setting at a very early age. He used to sit us all down on the competition floor right as the season began, and he would pass out these index cards. And on one side, we had to write down our long-term goals. I want to compete at the state competition. And eventually, I would write, I want to represent the United States at the Olympic Games. Well, that's all well and good. It's nice to have a dream, a goal, fantastic, but how are you going to get there? So we had to turn that card over. We had to painstakingly write down all of those short-term goals, all those things that we could try to accomplish each day that would lead up to that long-term goal. So if I wanted to make it to states, well, I needed a new dismount off of the balance beam, which meant I needed to get stronger, which meant more sit-ups and push-ups and leg lifts. Those were the things I could come in the gym and I could work on every single day. Now, I know everyone in this room understands the importance of goals. We know how to set goals. We know the importance of SMART goals. But I think the one thing that's often left out of the goal-setting conversation is the importance of follow-through, right? Because it's not enough to know what we need to do. We also have to do what we need to do if we want to achieve that ultimate success. I tell young athletes these days, the moment. You think of the moment. And they think of the moment as maybe walking out into the arena, sparkly leotard, all the cameras on you, the lights on, the audience is cheering for you, thousands of people cheering for you. But that's not the moment. The moment is way back in that hot, sweaty, smelly, chalky gym doing push-up after push-up after push-up when nobody is watching. That's the moment. That's when the magic happens. The magic happens in the work that you do every single day, even when it's not exciting or glamorous. But it's the work that has to be done. I know that the work I did each and every day was what ultimately led me to that first success, the first Olympic team that I qualified for, and that was in 1992. I was 15, which just seems really young. But 4 years later, I had the wonderful opportunity to come back as part of Team USA during the Atlanta Olympic Games, and what an incredible summer. Standing up there with my teammates, the Magnificent Seven, as we would come to be known, seeing the American flag being raised and hearing the sound of our national anthem, it was incredible. And you kind of just want to hang out up there. You've worked really hard to get there. It's a lot like this. You're standing up there and you think to yourself, okay, bring me a sleeping bag. Gonna camp out here for a little while. They do make you leave. So as we're politely escorted off the stage, it is a lot like this, and you've kind of got some stairs down at the end, and as I reached the bottom of the stairs, my coach, he gave me this big bear hug, and he took me by the shoulders, and he looked me in the eyes, and he said, okay, get focused. You have 3 more events to go. Yes, sir. But he was right. I was just getting started. The Olympics for gymnastics, depending on what you've qualified for, is a 2-week competition. And I had qualified for the all-around competition, so that's where you go and you compete in all 4 of the apparatus, the vault finals and then the balance beam finals. So a couple days later, I went into the all-around final and I was doing pretty well. I was in first place, headed into the 3rd of 4 events when it happened. And even if you know nothing about gymnastics, you know in sports, stepping out of the little white line, stepping out of bounds, not such a good idea. And that night, I stepped out of bounds on a tumbling pass. I don't know, my heel went over that little white line, could have been an inch, might as well have been a mile, didn't really matter at that point. That one step lost me any chance of a medal that night. And I was just devastated. All that time, all that effort, years of work, and I was heartbroken. Not that I ever think about it. over and over in my dreams. But I was heartbroken, and tears were shed for all of the world to see. And then at one point I stopped, and I thought, okay, I've got to rely on some of these lessons I've learned. And one of those is, okay, you can cry about it later, but right now you need to move on. You need to take the next forward step. And so I thought about vault and the next competition, and a couple days later I went into the vault competition. I saluted the judge. I ran down that 70-foot runway as fast as I could go. I hurdled onto the springboard, and I flew right over the top of that horse. I landed splat on my rear end in front of, well, I guess at that time it was the entire world. And yes, all of you can relive that wonderful moment through the magic of YouTube. Thank you very much. So there I was, splat. And the first thing I thought was, what just happened? What happened? And then the fear began to set in. And I remember speaking to my mother that night. I think venting to my mother that night would be a more appropriate use of words. And I just kind of unloaded. Mom, I don't know what happened. I mean, I stepped out of bounds during the all-around. I get that. You know, those things happen. But vault? I've never missed that vault. I never missed that vault in training, not in other competitions, and then splat. And now I have one last opportunity to bring home a medal for my country. The last 90 seconds of my entire Olympic career, and it all comes down to balance beam. 4 inches wide. The most feared event in all of gymnastics, and this is what I have to look forward to, and I was terrified. What if I don't belong here? What if I am over the hill? What if I let everybody down? And she stopped me there. She said, "Are you finished?" I said, "Yes, ma'am." She said, "Let me just ask you one question. Have you done the work? You know, at other competitions, at training each day, have you done the work?" And I said, "Absolutely, without a doubt, I've done the work. I always do the work. I may not always get it right, but I always give it 100%. And she said, "I know. And that's why I also know that you can walk into that arena, head held high, confident in the fact that no matter what happens, you've done everything you could to that moment to get it right." And then she also reminded me in a very nice way that I should be appreciative. I should truly appreciate this incredible opportunity that I have, that how many other little girls out there would have loved to have had that place. And the next day, as I walked into the arena, I walked up onto that platform. I saluted the judge for the very last time of my Olympic career. I held my hands over the top of the beam for just a couple of extra seconds that night. I took an extra deep breath. And I thought about what she had said, and I knew that she was right. And I just needed to enjoy the moment. Well, I think that beam routine was probably the fastest 90 seconds of my entire life. And all of a sudden, there I was, standing at the end, arms raised high, ready for the dismount. And I said a little prayer, "Please, God, just let me land on my feet tonight." I hurtled toward the end of the beam, 1 twist, 2 flips, and when I felt my feet hit the floor, and I realized I was standing up, it was the most amazing feeling. It just this mix of emotions, the joy and the excitement, the relief. I saw my coach jumping up and down on the sidelines. I think I saluted the judge, but who knows at that point. I didn't know what the score was. If there was a medal, what color it might be. I just wanted to live in that moment. If I'm ever in doubt about the importance of setting long-term and short-term goals, about getting back up after a fall, about believing in ourselves and what we can accomplish when we persevere, all I have to do is think of that moment. Yes, sports teaches you some great life lessons. It also teaches you about your body and all of the really cool things that it can do. Who knew you could flip upside down 3 times and land on your feet? And as a gymnast, I was not the most talented gymnast, let's just say. In fact, my coach, he will tell you that I was not his most talented gymnast. In fact, I heard him being interviewed. This is many, many years ago. I heard him during this interview, and a reporter kind of asked him how it was to work with Shannon Miller. And he kind of indicated that, well, it just must have been so wonderful and so easy because, I was just so talented. Well, my coach was very quick in his explanation that no, I was not his most talented athlete. In fact, I was this scrappy little girl with skinny legs and bent knees, and I wasn't very strong or flexible or powerful. But he said, I never coached a girl who worked harder than Shannon. And he talked about, right, I was scrappy. And he went on to talk about how I never missed a day gym. I might come in with the flu and stretch for a few minutes before he sent me home, but I was there. He talked about how other athletes might cut corners a little bit in their conditioning and their routines, but I always did just a little bit more. He'd tell us to do 50 push-ups, I'd do 55. Run 10 laps, I'd do 12. He said for a while, I couldn't figure out if she was a really hard worker or if she just couldn't count. But that's how I was wired. And frankly, I knew that that's what I was going to have to do if I wanted to succeed. I was simply going to have to outwork everybody else. Now, eventually, I realized that it wasn't just about the conditioning and the routines. It was also about how I fueled my body, because frankly, it doesn't really matter how far you want to go if you don't put any gas in the tank, right? So I had to learn about that. Now, I was admittedly a pretty picky eater growing up. My parents would say I was an extremely picky eater. Vegetables were not so much my thing. In fact, my mother still tells the spinach story. I'll just give you the short version. The short version is my mother made spinach one night for me, my sister, brother, our whole family, and all she asked, not like any mom, all she asked is, try a bite. Just try a bite. Well, my spinach sat on my plate and sat, and eventually she looked over and she said, Shannon, I just want you to understand you will not leave this table until you try a bite. Well, now I'm a little stubborn. So I'm thinking, challenge accepted. And I sat there. And I probably sat there a couple of hours until finally my father either took pity on me or he just wanted to go to bed. I don't know which, but he just said, Shannon, bring me your plate. And that was kind of par for the course. And so eventually my parents talked to my coaches, and my coach said, have you ever tried this thing called Juice Plus? It's basically fruits and vegetables, and it might help out with, just getting her some of the nutrition that she needs. My parents said, okay, we can try that. And I began to utilize Juice Plus as part of my everyday training regimen, along with everything else. And we always think about sports. We think about the strength and flexibility. We think about the mental aspect of sports. That's so important. We understand that there is that rest and recuperation that has to happen in order to be successful, but we cannot discount the importance of our nutrition in excelling in sport. So I benefited greatly from Juice Plus throughout my training and Olympic career. However, when I retired from Olympic training, I think I lost a little bit of that understanding of the importance of fueling my body, of really focusing on my health. I mean, I was always pretty healthy. I think I kind of took it for granted. And hey, I wasn't training for this huge competition anymore. And I don't think I consciously thought about not taking Juice Plus. It just kind of got lost in the shuffle of moving to college and not eating the meals that my parents prepared for me, and all of the other changes going on in my life. It wasn't until years later that I would realize that I was fueling my body for something so much more important than any competition could ever be. I needed to fuel my body for life. And in 2011, that became crystal clear. 2011 was the year that I was diagnosed with ovarian cancer. Now, that was a rough year, but I'm going to back up for just a couple minutes. 2010 was actually a really good year. I like talking about 2010. 2010 was the summer that I launched my company devoted to women's health and wellness. Our mission is to help women make their health a priority. And yes, and at the same time, I started doing this radio show. I was asked to host this radio show. And so every weekend, I would go in and I would interview physicians and nurses for an hour about, every health topic you could possibly imagine. And as we moved into the fall, I was talking a lot about the importance of cancer awareness, how important early detection is, and understanding the signs and symptoms, getting to your doctor's exams, all those good things. And it was about that time that I began to feel completely overwhelmed with everything, and in a good way. It was just work was taking off, and there were partnerships and programs and deadlines. Oh, so many deadlines coming up. And that fall, our son turned a year old, so we were enjoying that portion. The holidays were coming up, so we're all insane during the holidays, and I just looked down at my calendar and I saw that I was going to be out of town on the date of my doctor's appointment. So I thought, I feel fine. I'm pretty healthy. I'll push it off till next year. It'll be fine. So I called up my doctor's office, and I was immediately put on hold. And as I sat there waiting, I just felt this tremendous amount of guilt. I mean, here I was, an advocate for women's health, about to do the exact opposite of everything I'm telling women. And that did not sit well with me. So when the receptionist came back on the line, I said, all right, I'm going to be out of town, but I don't want to wait. Can I maybe get on a first available list, a cancellation list? I'll figure it out. She said, oh, that's fantastic. That was a cancellation on the other line. Can you come over now? Sure, because I have nothing else to do today. But I did. I drove straight over there, not thinking twice about whether or not I'm healthy, trying to figure out if I can get in and out, on with the other 1,000 of things I have to do that morning, and cancer. Cancer was not on my radar. That morning, in the span of maybe a 15-minute visit, I got the shock of my life. I had a baseball-sized cyst on my left ovary, and that kind of went into this whirlwind of tests and scans, and by January, I was sitting with an oncologist being scheduled for immediate surgery. I look back at that time, and I feel like that was the first phase of my journey, kind of leading up to surgery. And I always hesitate to say, that seemed like the most challenging phase for me, because it's all challenging. There's nothing easy about a cancer diagnosis or treatment. But I think for me, that first phase of wait and observe, of so many questions and so few answers, of that complete loss of control. And for a very type A person like me, it was confusing, and there was a lot of fear. And for me, I had been this athlete for the better part of my life. I had trained my body. I knew everything that was going on in my body. I had to. My body is what I used as a tool to quite literally become the best in the world at something. And now I had no idea what was going on, and it was terrifying. And when I woke up from surgery, I found out that, yes, it was cancer, a rare form of ovarian cancer, but they had caught it early. And we kind of breathed this sigh of relief. And it wasn't until a couple weeks later I found out it was a higher malignancy than they thought, and I would need to go through this pretty aggressive chemotherapy regimen. And I think at that point, something in my mind switched, and I kind of went from this victim mentality where everything was happening to me to reverting back to that competitive mentality I knew so well through sport. All of a sudden, I knew what the plan was. I had specific goals. Now, I didn't necessarily know where I was going to end up, but I knew what I could get up and be in charge of each and every day. And so I started to think forward. As I got ready for chemo, I worked on protein and hydration. I couldn't do much physically after the surgery, but I knew the mental game was so important. So, you give yourself a few pep talks. You used to work out 40 hours a week. You can do this. You are an Olympic champion. You can do this. You tell yourself anything. And then that first week of chemo started, and man, it was rough. It was by far the hardest thing I have ever had to do. In 2011, it was that love and that support that helped me get through one of the most challenging time in my life. That was the year I was diagnosed with ovarian cancer. The day I found out I had a cyst on my ovary was the same day that I called up my doctor's office to cancel my appointment because I was just too busy. I had just launched my company devoted to women's health. Our son had just turned a year old, and I waited online for the receptionist, and when she came back on, I just felt this incredible guilt because here I was, an advocate for women's health, about to cancel my own exam. And so when she came back on, I said, I'll just take the first available appointment and I'll figure it out. And she said, oh, great, because that was a cancellation on the other line. Can you come over now? But I did. I drove straight over there, and that was the morning that my doctor found a baseball-sized cyst on my left ovary. And within weeks, that cyst was diagnosed as ovarian cancer. Looking back, I realized that I had several of the primary symptoms, lovely things like bloating and severe stomach aches. I had lost some weight, but it was so easy to push these off as not very important, unrelated issues. I mean, come on, bloating every month? And I thought maybe it was my post-baby body. It was just a little out of whack. Maybe it was just stress. Maybe I ate something bad. It was so easy to find numerous reasons why this wasn't a big deal. And I pushed all of these symptoms aside. I should have listened to my body. I should have told my doctor how I was feeling, and instead, I told him I felt fine. And the fact is, we know our bodies better than anyone else. We just have to pay attention. And we have to speak up when something isn't right. And at the time, I wish I had had more education, more information, more resources that I could turn to throughout my journey. And that's why this is a passion of mine. Because I think so many of us, if not all of us standing right here in this room or watching us right now, will be affected by cancer in some way. It might be us personally. It might be a friend, a family member, a loved one, a coworker, a neighbor, but we will all be affected. And there's one thing that is certain. You need support.